everyone, it's another beautiful day that we get to continue learning Excel. My name is Mary Kajoka and this is our video number 6 for the Business to 16 class here at Highline College. In our last Excel Basics video number 5, we learned to calculate with one or more criteria, and we used the traditional formulas and the dynamic spilled array formulas. In this video, we will see and compare the 3 types of formulas: the traditional formula, which is the single input, single output formulas, the dynamic spilled array formulas, and we will learn a new formula, which is the Excel table formulas. In this video, we will get to learn how to use the Excel table feature. We will learn how to name our tables, or we will see the advantage of using Excel tables. We will get to learn how to name our cell references and ranges with defined names. And we will use the defined names in our formulas as well. In addition to all this, we will refresh our memories with sorting a unique list and adding data validation. Here is a list of the calculations that we will continue to work on in this video. Let's now go to the notes on types of formulas worksheet to review the notes together before we start working on the calculations in this video. The 3 types of formulas are the traditional formulas, the dynamic spilled array formulas, and the Excel table formulas. In our past videos, we have learned the traditional formulas. I call them the traditional formulas, but my mentor, Michael Gavin, calls these single input, single output formulas. With the single input, single output formulas, they operate on single inputs and they also deliver a single answer. So these formulas have single values entered in a function argument, or they have single values on either side of the operator. For example, if you're adding using the cell references A1 plus B1, the operator here will be the addition operator. The formula requirements for the traditional formulas are you need to use in the formula the cell references either has to be relative, absolute, or mixed cell references. The formula is entered in one cell, and if you must copy your formula, you will have to manually copy your formula in the other cells. If you edit your formula, you edit in one cell, and then you have to recopy the formula to the other cells if necessary. You also use this formula if you have to send the solution to someone without the Office 365 or the M365 Excel. We have also seen in our past videos the dynamic spilled array formulas. These formulas deliver a spilled array to the neighboring cells as the final answer. And with the dynamic spilled array formulas, they spill from the top of the cell and the formula lives on the top of the cell, but it spills to the neighboring cells. In our past videos, we learned to use the dynamic spilled array formulas and the traditional formulas. The third formula we get to learn in this class is the Excel table formula. The Excel table formulas use the table formula nomenclature rather than the cell references. The Excel table formulas are dynamic because if you add rows or columns, everything pointing to the table will update with new data. That is, if you add new records to your table, the formula will automatically copy down to the column. You must remember that if you need to lock a cell references, then you must lock the cell references. I have a picture here of the Excel table formulas, and we will see how to use these formulas in our upcoming calculations in this video. Now let's click on the type of formulas and start on our calculations for this video. On this worksheet, we will calculate the commission rate using the 3 types of formulas. We will compare all 3 and you get to see when to use each formula. You also get to decide which you like better. Let's start with the traditional formula, and I'm in cell B9. As always, we start our formula with the equal sign. And we will use the round function as we have already learned how to use the round function in this class. So equals round the sales amount, that's a relative cell reference, multiplied by the commission rate, Since we will copy our formula down to the other cells, we will lock this F4 key to lock that or make it an absolute cell reference, and then put a comma. We're rounding to 2, close our formula, Control Enter, and now we get to copy our formula down. So I'm gonna come all the way to the right side, and when I see the cross, I will double click and copy my formula down. Come to the last cell, F2, to verify my formula, and I see that I have a relative cell reference for the sales amount, and I have an absolute cell reference for the commission rate. Press Escape to get out of the edit mode. So now that's the way we do to calculate the traditional formula, and we have seen this in our past videos. Now let's use the dynamic spill array formula. I'm in cell G9, and again we'll do equals, round. This time we're using the dynamic spill array formula. Thus we will select all the cells that we are using in this formula, which is the sales amount, and we are multiplying that by the commission rate. We are not locking that since we are spilling our answers. So we put a comma, we're rounding to 2, close that, Control Enter, and we can see our formula is only in this top cell, but it spills our answers to the neighboring cells here. If I click here and look at the formula bar, it's grayed out. On the top cell, the formula bar, the formula is not grayed out. That means our formula is only on this top cell. Now with the traditional formula, as I said, you will use this formula when you will have to send a solution to someone who doesn't have the Microsoft Office 365 Excel or the M365 Excel. With the dynamic spilled array formulas, as we have seen previously in our past lessons, we do not lock the cell references. We didn't lock any cell references here. We do not need to manually copy the formula. And if we need to edit our formula, it's easier and faster because we'll only edit the top cell where our formula lives. Now let's learn this formula that we haven't done in any of our past videos. And this is the Excel table formula. So the first thing that we need to do is to convert this data set to a proper Excel table. And we will use a keyboard shortcut for that. In our class notes for video number 6, I have given you some details on how to convert our proper data set to an Excel table. So I'll use the keyboard shortcut, Control T. I need to make sure that I have selected any one of these cells in this data set. I don't have to select all of it, just one cell, and then Control T. And now you can see we have the Create Table dialog box here. Where is the data for your table? We can see the dancing ants right there. They have selected the data that we're using for our table. And you can see my table has headers. That box is checked. And this is because our table has headers right there. So now we'll click OK. And you can see now that is converted to an Excel table. The first thing that we need to do once we convert our data set to a table is to name the table. So we'll name this table Sales Commission. So come up here on your ribbon on the Properties group. And you can see we have another tab right there. Now this is a contextual tab that appears if we have an object selected, for example, in Word or in Excel applications. So this is a table, this is an object, and that's why we have the Table Design tab appear here. Now if I click outside that table, I don't have that tab, the contextual tab of the Table Design appear here. But if I click inside the table, I can see now I have the Table Design tab right there. So I'll come up here to the Properties and I will name our table. And as I said, we are naming this Sales Commission. So we don't include spaces or characters when naming our tables. With our table named, I'll press Enter. Now let's enter our formula in cell L9. And we will start our formula with equals as always. Equals, round, Do not select that entire selection because we are not using a dynamic spilled array formula. We don't use that when we're using the Excel table formulas. And so I will delete that, selecting it and pressing the delete key. I will select just one cell reference right there, and you can see the name of the cell reference is right there. And I'm multiplying this by the commission rate, which is the cell reference L6. Now, what happens if you don't lock this? Because when we're using the Excel table formulas, we need to remember to lock the cell references because our formula will automatically copy down the column. So what happens if we don't lock this? I'll put a comma and put 2, close that, and let's enter and see what happens. We see we get an error because we didn't lock our cell reference for the commission rate. Now, if I click on any of these cells and press F2, I can see my cell reference is not locked at L6, but it's moving relatively down as my formula automatically copies down the column. Now we will need to edit this because we don't want to see these errors. So press escape to get out of the edit mode. I'll go back to my cell that has my first formula right there. And with the Excel table formulas, we just have to edit the first formula and it will automatically update all the other formulas for us. So I'll press F2 and I will place my cursor on the cell reference L6 and I'll press F4 to lock that. And now that is locked. Now let's enter that and we can see our formula automatically updates and it's automatically copying down the column. So you need to remember, if you're using the Excel table formulas, if there's a cell reference that you have to lock, you have to remember to lock that cell reference because we have seen it will give you errors because we didn't lock the commission rate and we saw the errors that it gave us. When do we use the Excel table formulas? We use this formula when you will add new records to your table because once you add new records to your table, your data will automatically update. Your formulas will also automatically copy down the column, but you still need to remember that you have to lock the cell references. Now that we have seen the 3 different types of formulas, you get to choose which one you like better and then you can use that one. But we have also learned that when to use these different types of formulas and what are the advantages of using these types of formulas. Now let's go to the next worksheet, and our next worksheet is COUNTIFS. On this worksheet, which is example 1, we have our goal listed here. We will convert the proper data set into an Excel table and name the table. We will count how many products were sold by which sales rep, right there. We will also count how many products were sold by which sales rep in each region. We will create a sorted unique list for the products and the sales rep, and we'll add data validation to the criteria product and the sales rep in the cells G7 and H7 from the unique list that we will create. We will also add conditional formatting to the table right here to highlight the criteria count. Let's start by converting this proper data set to an Excel table. I need to make sure that I have clicked inside this proper data set. I cannot be outside the proper data set and create a table for this table. I have to be inside. You also do not have to select the entire table to be able to create a table from this data set. All you need to do is to make sure that you are inside this data set and you have selected just one cell. And then you will use our keyboard shortcut, Control-T, to convert this proper data set to an Excel table. Where is the data for your table? This is our Create Table dialog box. And you can see it's right here, it's locked, and you can see the dancing ants around our proper data set. My table has headers boxes checked, and you can see our table has headers right there. So we'll click OK. And the first thing, as I said, that we need to do is to name the table. So up here on our properties group, we can see we have the table name, and now it's table 3, but we will name that to reflect what data or what we are calculating in this worksheet. And you can see right here, as I said, once we convert this to an Excel table, we have the table design tab. So we'll click here and we will name this table product count table and enter. And remember, we don't include spaces or characters while naming our table. Now, the next thing that we need to do is to count how many products were sold by which sales rep. I'll come here to cell H8, that's where we will create our formula, and we will use the COUNTIFS. So equals COUNTIFS our criteria range will start with the product. So our criteria range will be the product field. And once I see that black arrow pointing on the products field, I will click on it. And now we can see the products field is selected. Right here on our formula, we can see the name of the table and the name of the field. We'll put a comma and we'll provide our criteria, which is right here. The cell reference is G7 for the product. And then we'll put a comma to go to the next criteria range. The next criteria range will be the sales rep, since our criteria here is the sales rep. And I will hover here on our Excel table next to the sales rep field. And when I see that black pointing arrow, I will click on it. And we can see now it's selected. The name of our table and the name of our field. We'll put a comma and we'll provide the criteria, which is our second criteria right there. And now, because we are not copying this formula anywhere, that's why I didn't lock any of the criterias. And now I will need to do is to close that and enter. And we can see we have 7 count. So our sales rep, Miles, the product that they sold, which is Hot Wheels, they sold a count of 7 of these products. The next thing that we need to do is to count how many products were sold by which sales rep in each region. So we'll do that right here on this table. And I have already converted these to an Excel table because we need to use Excel table formulas in this lesson. So I'll start with equals to start our formula. We're doing COUNTIFS, tap to select that. Our criteria range, as I said from video number 5, we can start with any criteria range as long as we provide the right criteria that is matching with that criteria range. We will start with the products. So I will come to our table right here to the products field. And instead of selecting all that field there, I will hover on it until I see that black arrow pointing down to that field. Click on that, put a comma, provide the criteria, which is the Hot Wheels product right there. And because this formula will copy down automatically because this is an Excel table, we need to make sure that we lock that. So F4 to lock that, and I'll put a comma to go to the next criteria range. Our next criteria, let's start with the sales rep. And as I said, you can start with any of the criteria. So I'm gonna go next to the sales rep, which means on our table right here, I will select the sales rep and I provide the criteria. Need to make sure that I lock it. F4 to lock that. Put a comma. And now we provide our third criteria range. And for us here, it's the region. So the criteria range will be the region field right here on our table. I hover on our table until I see that black arrow pointing down. Click on it to select that entire field. And then I put a comma. And then right here, I'm not selecting this all column. I'm not just selecting all that, as we saw in our previous example in our types of formulas worksheet. I'm only selecting this cell reference. And you can see the name of the column right there, and this is the cell reference for this cell right there. And now I can close my formula, and once I enter, my formula will be automatically copied down the column. So we'll enter, and we can see that our formula has copied down the column. And if I click any of these and press F2, we can see it has the correct cell references, the correct cell reference for the region, which is a relative cell reference right there. And we can also see the cell references for the product and the sales rep. We locked them, and that's why they are not moving relatively down our formula as we copy that down. I'll press escape to get out of the edit mode. The next thing that we need to do is to create a data validation for these two cells right here, because we want to be able to change the product to a different product and change the sales rep to a different sales rep and have our formula calculate here and update to the sales rep that we will put here or to the product that we will change here to. The first thing that we need to do before we create the data validation for these two cells, we need to create a unique list. We will create a sorted unique list, and we have learned how to do that in our past videos. So I will scroll all the way to the right, and I'm on cell O2. This is where I will create our sorted list. And we are creating a unique list for the product and for the sales rep. Now let's start our formula. Equals, we are sorting our unique list. So we'll start with sort, tap to select that, and then unique, tap to select that. We're starting with the product. So from our table right here, I will select the product field, and since this is a table, I don't have to select all the cells. I will just click up there when I see that arrow pointing down, and I can see the name of our table and the field, and I will close our formula and enter. I have a product unique list sorted, and I will expand that column to fit our products. The next one that we will do is create a unique list for the sales rep. We'll use the same formula, equals sort unique, and this is our sales rep. So back here to our Excel table, once I see the black arrow right there, I will click to select that field, and we can see the name of the table and the name of the field that we are using. Close that and enter. And now we have the sorted list for the product and for the sales rep. Now we'll come back here to cell G7, and I would like to do a data validation for this cell so that we are only getting a list from our unique list that we have created here for the products. So if you can remember how to do the data validation from our last videos, we'll click on the data tab here on our ribbon, and we'll go to the data tools group and select on the data validation button right there, and then click to select the data validation. And now we can see we are allowing values, any value into that cell. We'll change that and allow values only from a list that we will provide. I will click on the source box, and I will provide the list, which is our unique list right there. And now I will click OK. And now we have done our data validation for our cell G7 right there. So we will only have the list of products that we have provided right there. Press escape, and let's do the same for the sales rep. I'm still in the data tab in our ribbon. Data tools group right there, data validation, click on that arrow, select data validation and click on it. We're changing from any value to a list. Click on the source box, and then our list is right here, the sales rep, and then we'll click OK, And we can see here too, we also have our data validation for our sales rep field. Now, if we change the product and the sales rep, our formula here will update and our formula here will also update. Now let's change the product here and let's change to LOL surprise. And we can see that updated. And if we change the sales rep too, I will change that to Tiana. We can see that count updated as well, and this count also updated as well. Now from our goal here, the next thing that we will do is to add conditional formatting to the table to highlight the criteria count. But before we do that, let's scroll to the right and we want to style this and make it pretty. So I will click there and I will edit that uppercase S, and I also want to center that. So I will do Control-1, alignment, and I'm using the horizontal center across selection, and I click OK. And I also would like to add some borders to this. So I will go to my Home tab, or I can use Control-1, go to the border, and I'm just doing a bottom border. And I will click OK. And I think I would like to add a bottom border to that as well. And I can do it from my Home tab here in the font group and select the bottom border. If you would like to style it differently, you're more than welcome to do that. I think I'll bold that, Control B to bold. And I will bold this too, Control B to bold that. For me, it looks good, but if you would like to style it to look much better, you're welcome to do that now that we know how to style. Now let's come back here and finish our last goal here to add conditional formatting to the table and highlight the criteria count. So what we want to do is in our table right here, the records that have the criteria that we will specify here, or the sales rep that will specify here, will be highlighted. And we will use the AND logical test. So with the AND logical test, the product field and the sales rep field, they have to contain the criteria that is listed here for it to be highlighted on our table right here. So let's do that. I will select all these fields because we need to highlight the records that has the criteria that we will specify. And then on our Home tab, on the Styles group, we will select on the Conditional Formatting button and click on that arrow. We would like to highlight the cells, but then we'll scroll down and select More Rules. And now we can see we open the new Formatting Rule dialog box. We will use a formula to determine which cells that we are formatting. And right here on this box, format values where this formula is true. Again, we are using the AND logical test, so it has to meet the criteria that we specify. And therefore equals AND, which is our logical test. And we want the product. I will select that. And I only want to lock the column, but not the row, because I want my formula to update in all these other records. So I will use a mix or reference. I'm not locking the row. So if that product is equal to the product criteria that we have right there, and so I'll put a comma for the next argument, the sales rep, and again, I'm only locking the column, not the row, is equal to the sales rep criteria that we are providing there. That has to be an absolute cell reference. And I will close that. So if that logical test comes out to be true, I want to format that and I would like to highlight that. And you can see I've opened the Format Cell dialog box using this Format button right there. What color would I like to use? You can use the color of your choice here. I will select yellow and I will click OK. And right here, I will click OK. And now we can see from our table here, the records that contain the sales rep is Tiana and the product is LOL Surprise. Those records are highlighted on our table. So if we were to change this to a different sales rep, we can see that highlights as well. If we were to change the product, we can see that highlights as well. So that's the way you will do the conditional formatting if you would like to highlight only the records that meet the criteria that you specify. Now let's go to our next example, which is the COUNTIFS 2 worksheet. On our example 2, the goal is to convert the proper data set into an Excel table and name the table. We're counting how many sales that are greater than 40,000, and we are counting how many sales are greater than 40,000 in each region. Now, in an example like this, it might be harder to use a pivot table because we are creating a condition greater than. We are using a comparative operator condition for the sales greater than for our condition or our criteria here. So in an example like this, we can use an Excel table formula to solve this. So the first thing that we need to do is to convert this proper data set into an Excel table. And again, I'm making sure that I am inside this data set, just one cell selected. And I will show you, if you don't like to using the keyboard shortcut, even though I highly recommend the keyboard shortcut because it is faster. Before we use our keyboard shortcut to convert this proper data set into an Excel table and name the table and do our calculations, I would like to show you that if you do not want to use the keyboard shortcut to convert this proper data set into an Excel table, these other two options that you can use. And the first option that I will show you, you can click in one cell in your table. That's the first thing that you need to do. And then go to the Home tab on your ribbon. And then on the Styles group, click on the Format as a Table button. Click on this arrow to show the different table styles. And then select the table style that you would like to use. And then the Create Table dialog box appears. Where is the data for your table? You can see it's selected right there. And my table has headers box is checked as well. And you can click OK. I will click cancel because I would like to show you the other option. So the other option, again, make sure that you click on one cell in your table or in your proper data set, and then go to the Insert tab on your ribbon. And then in the Tables group, you click the Table button. And you can see the keyboard shortcut right there. It's Control-T, which I love using keyboard shortcut. That's why I use Control-T. You click on that table button. And again, you can see the Create Table dialog box is open. Where is the data for your table? That is selected there. It's locked, and that is selected right there on our proper data set. My table has headers box is selected, and you can click OK. Now, the method that I always use, or the option that I always like to use, is the keyboard shortcut. I'm making sure that I have clicked on one cell in my proper data set or in my table, and I'll use the keyboard shortcut Control-T, and you can see I don't have to do different clicks to get to the Create Table dialog box. I just have to do my Control-T keyboard shortcut. It opens the Create Table dialog box. Where is the data from your table? Right there, it's selected. My table has headers box is checked, and I will click OK. Now, the first thing that we need to do once we convert our proper data set to a table is to make sure that we name our table. So the first thing that I will need to do, I have the Table Design tab right there. On my Properties group, I need to name this table. That's the first thing that I always need to remember to do. And that's what I want you to always remember to do. Name your table. We will name this table Region Sales Count, because what we are doing in this table, we are counting the sales that are greater than 40,000 for each region. So I'll name this region sales count. And remember, we're not leaving spaces. We are not including any characters when we are naming our table. And I'll press enter. Now that our table is named, we can now go ahead and do our calculation here. The first thing that we need to do is to count how many sales that are greater than 40,000. So we'll do equals COUNTIFS. And our criteria range is the revenue. So I'm pointing to the revenue field. I have the name of the table, the name of the field, and I'll put a comma and provide the criteria, which is our comparative operator. The condition is greater than 40,000. I don't have to lock that because I'm not copying my formula. I will close that and control enter. And we can see the sales that are greater than 40,000, we have a count of 9. So in our next calculation, we're calculating how many sales that are greater than 40,000 in each region. That means we have 2 conditions or 2 criteria that we are counting in this formula right here. We're using the Excel table formulas, as this is what we're doing in this lesson. We're learning how to use the Excel table formula. This data set or this table has already been converted to an Excel table. And we can see right here on the table design, the table name is right here. So we're counting with 2 conditions or with 2 criteria. We'll do equals COUNTIFS. Our criteria range, we can start with either of the criteria, either the region or the sales. So our criteria range, let's start with the region. So let's do the criteria range for the region field. Once I see my arrow, I will click on that field and I'll put a comma, provide the region, which is that sales reference, and then put a comma. Our second criteria range is the sales or is the revenue field, because we have the sales handle for greater than 40,000. So on my table, I will hover there on the revenue column. When I see that arrow pointing down, I click on it to select the revenue field, and I can see the name of the table and the name of the field. And then I'll put a comma, and I will now click to select the criteria, which is the sales handle greater than 40,000. I need to make sure that I remember to lock that, because my formula will automatically copy down my column. So F4 to lock that, and I will close my formula. And now when I press enter or control enter, I can see my formula has updated and copied down automatically down the column. And if I click on any of these cells to verify the formula, F2, I can see I have the correct cell references, the correct ranges selected, the correct greater than 40,000 cell reference selected right there, and it is locked. And I also have the correct cell reference for the region, which is the relative cell reference right there. Now press escape to get out of the edit mode. And now we have seen how to count with different criteria using the Excel table formulas. And as I said, this is an example that using a pivot table might be harder, because we are using the comparative operator as our condition or as our criteria. Now let's go to our next example, where we will do the AVERAGEIFS. I will click on the AVERAGEIFS worksheet. On this worksheet is our example number 3. The goal here is to convert proper data set into an Excel table and name the table. We will calculate the average sales for each product in each region. We'll create a sorted unique list for the products in the cell references 05 to 07. We will add the data validation for the products in cell G8 from the range that we will create our unique list on. So as I said, always, you cannot select a cell outside your proper data set if you're creating a table. You have to be inside that table or inside that proper data set to be able to create an Excel table. So I have selected one cell inside this data set, and I will use my keyboard shortcut. By now, you know I like using the keyboard shortcuts. So Control T, my table has headers. I'm making sure that that box is checked, and I will click OK. The first thing that I need to do is to name this table. So I have the table design tab right there, and on the properties group, I will name this table. We are naming this table region average because on this worksheet, we're calculating the average for each region, or we're calculating the average revenue for each region. So up here, I will name this region average and press enter. With our table named, the next thing that we need to do now is to calculate the average. So I'm in cell H13, and I will use the formula AVERAGEIFS. So equals average, and our average range is the revenue because we want to calculate the average for the revenue. So I'm hovering on my table. Once I see that arrow, I click on it to select that field, and I'll put a comma. Our criteria range will be the region because we're starting with the region criteria. We can either start with the product or the region. I'll start with the region. So I will select the region field from our table. I'm hovering on our table until I see that arrow pointing down. Click on it to select the region field, and I'll put a comma and provide the criteria, which is the region. So I'm selecting just one cell there from our table right there. And then I'll put a comma to go to the next criteria. And our next criteria is the product. So our criteria range will be the products field. Once I see that arrow, I click on it to select the products field. And I have the table and the product field there. I'll put a comma to separate the argument. And I'll provide this second criteria, which is the product right there. Now I have to remember that I have to lock this because when we are using Excel tables, we must lock the cell references. Our formula will automatically copy down the column. So if we don't lock that, the cell reference will move relatively down as we copy our formula. We don't want that, so we need to lock that. F4 to lock that cell reference. And we are done with our criteria. I will close that and Control Enter, or you can press Enter. And we can see we calculated the average for each region if the product is Hot Wheels there. So now the next thing that we need to do is to create a sorted unique list that we will use for our data validation in this cell G8, so that when we change our product here, we want to see if our average revenue right here calculates properly or it updates to reflect the product that we will have here. So I'm going to cell O3, and right here I will type sorted unique list, and we're creating a unique list for the products, and we will use our formula equals sort unique, and we're sorting, or we want to get a unique list for the products. So on my table here, I'm hovering on my table. Once I see that arrow pointing to the products field, I will click on it, and I have the name of the table, the name of the field. I will close that, and I will enter, and I have my unique list for the products. I will adjust this, and I will bold this too to give it some style, and I will also add some border right there, and add some border right there as well. And if it doesn't look good, you can style more to look the way you would like it to look. I will leave it that way. I have my unique list right there. So right here, I want to add the data validation for the products. And we remember how to add our data validations. We have to go to the data tab on our ribbon, and then on the data tools group, click on that arrow on the data validation button, select the data validation and click on it. And now we are allowing any value. We want to change that to a list. Click on the source box and then provide the list, and then click OK. So So now we have done data validation on cell G8 and we have our list there. So in case we change the product, we can see our calculations update as well. If I change that again, we can see our calculations are updating as well here. So I will go back and change it to Hot Wheels, and that has also updated there. So again, the advantages of Excel table formulas are listed here. And when using Excel tables, we must lock the cell references because our formula will automatically copy down the column. The next calculation that we'll work on is the SUMIFS. Now let's go to the SUMIFS worksheet. On this worksheet is our example number 4, and our goal is to convert the proper data set into an Excel table and name the table. We will add the total revenue for a product for the sales rep specified here. I have already added the data validation from the unique list that I have created here. I will also add the total revenue for the specified product in each region for a specified sales rep, which will do that in this table right here. This table is already converted to an Excel table and it's already named. We'll also add new records to our table here, and we'll see if our formulas automatically update. Let's start by converting this proper data set into an Excel table. I'm clicking on any one cell in this proper data set, and I'm using my keyboard shortcut Control-T. I'm making sure that my table has headers box is checked because we have headers. We don't want to automatically create headers, or we don't want Excel to create for us the default headers. So I will click OK. Next thing that we need to do is to name our table. We're naming this table monthly revenue because we're calculating the total revenue for the region. So we will name it monthly revenue or region revenue. So I will name it monthly revenue and press enter. Now we have our table named. So the next thing that we need to do is to add total revenue for the product, sale, and the sales rep that is specified. So we have our product here and we have our sales rep here. I'm in cell H10, and as I said, I have already added data validation here from our unique list here, and for the sales rep as well from our unique list right there. So I'm in cell H10, and we will use the SUMIFS function. So equals SUMIFS, tab to select that. Our sum range is the revenue. So I will hover on our table, and once I see that arrow, I will click on it to select that entire field, and then I'll put a comma, and now I will provide our criteria range 1. We can either start with the product or the sales rep, it doesn't matter. So I will start with the product. That means our criteria range will be the product fields. I'll hover on my table. Once I see that arrow, I will click on the products field to select it, and I can see it's right there, the name of the table and the name of the field. I'll put a comma to separate the argument, and I will now provide the criteria. Our criteria has to match. So we started with the product field, so our criteria will be the product. And I don't have to lock this because I am not copying my formula to any other cell. So I'll put a comma to separate that and go to the next argument. Our second criteria is the sales rep. That means our criteria range will be the sales rep field. I'm hovering on my table, and once I see that arrow, I will click on it to select the sales rep field. And then I'll put a comma to separate the argument. And I'll provide our second criteria, which is the sales rep right there. And I will close our formula and Control Enter. And I can see now we have calculated the total revenue if the product is Hot Wheels and the sales rep is miles. Now, if we were to change the product and leave the sales rep the same, we can see the total revenue for this product has changed. If we change the sales rep to Cinderella, we can see Cinderella has higher sales with that product. So because we already have a data validation here, we can change the product or the sales rep to see what the total revenue will be on our specified criteria there. The next thing that we need to do is to add the total revenue for the specified product in each region based on our sales rep and our product right there. So again, this table has already been converted to a table. And if I click on the table design, we can see it's already named there. We will do our formula here. So equals SUMIFS. We are adding with 3 different criteria. SUMIFS. The sum range again is the revenue. So I'm selecting the revenue right there. And I put a comma. Our criteria range, we have 3 different criteria. And we can start with any criteria. I will start with the region. So I'll have to select the regions field from our table. So I'll hover there, and once I see that arrow pointing down, I click on it. My region field is selected and I can see it there on my formula. I put a comma to separate the argument. My criteria is the region on this table right there. I'm just clicking on that one cell reference. And you can see the name of that column in the cell reference right there. I'll put a comma to go to the next argument, which is our second criteria. I will start with the product. That means on my table, I will select the products field. Once I see my arrow pointing down, I will click on it to select that entire field. And I can see the name right there. I'll put a comma and provide the criteria. Now I have to remember that this formula will automatically copy down the column. So I need to lock that, F4 to lock that. I put a comma to go to the next criteria. And our third criteria here is the sales rep. That means our criteria range will be the sales rep field. Come to our table here and hover on the sales rep field. Once I see the arrow pointing down, I will click on it to select that field, and I'll put a comma to go to the next argument, which is our third criteria. So I will select the criteria for the sales rep. Again, I need to remember to lock this since my formula will automatically copy down the column, and I don't want my formula to relatively move down as it copies down the column. I will lock that, F4 key to lock that. And now I can close my formula and Control Enter. And I can see I'm calculating the total revenue for the central region if the sales rep is Cinderella and the product is LOL MG Surprise. If I change the product, I can see the total revenue updates here as well. If I change the sales rep, I can see that updates as well. And if I change again the sales rep, that updates as well. And the total revenue here updates too. So that's how you will do the SUMIFS with the Excel table formulas. Now, in an example like this, a pivot table may be easier, but you have to remember the pivot table does not automatically update if you add more data. Then you will have to refresh your pivot table. But with the Excel table formulas, if we add new records to our data, our formulas here will automatically update. Now let's add new records and see how that will automatically update. And you can see the total revenue and the total revenue that we have for each region there. I will scroll down. I have additional records here. I will select these additional records that we want to add to our table. Control C to copy that. And I'm scrolling up using that bar right there. And I will zoom out because I would like us to see once I add the records that our data or our formulas automatically update. Now let me zoom out one more time. And now we can see the total revenue and we can see the total revenue for the regions on our Excel table formulas there. And I want to show you if we add new records to our Excel table, our formulas here will automatically update And our table here also will automatically update. So I have the new records selected here, Control C. I'll click on cell A43 and I will press Control V on my keyboard. But before I do that, I want you to be watching here the total revenue amount and the total revenue for the regions here. Once I add these new records to our table here, our data will automatically update with the new records and our formulas here will also automatically update. So Control V, and you can see our total revenue updated with the new records that we added, and also our total revenue for each region updated as well. Now with the new records that we have added, if we were to change our product criteria here, that still updates here as well. And if we were to put it back and change our sales rep to, that updates as well. So now we have seen how to do SUMIFS calculations with the Excel table formulas. We have seen if we add new records to our Excel table, our formulas will update automatically as the new records is added to our Excel table. And also, as I said earlier, this is an example where pivot table might be easier to use, and we will see how to create a pivot table in our upcoming video. But we have to remember, if you're using a pivot table, we have to refresh the pivot table if we add new records to our data. The pivot table will not automatically update. Unlike the Excel table formulas, the formulas will automatically update if we add new records to our data. Now let's go to the define names and data validation worksheet. On this worksheet is our example number 5. We're using the SUMIFS, and our goal here is to create define names for each field. We'll create the define names for the criteria to calculate. We'll create a unique list for the products and the sales rep fields. We'll add data validation for the product and the sales rep criteria in cell G9 and H9. We'll then add the total revenue for the product for the sales rep specified and add the total revenue for the specified product in each region for a specified sales rep. We can use define names for a cell range, a table, or a single cell reference. Using the names or using the define names can make the formulas easier to understand and also easy to maintain. Now, how do we name our cell? If we were to name our cell, for example, let's start with naming our criteria here. We want to name this cell, which is G9. We'll select that cell. Once the cell is selected, in our name box right here, we select that. And instead of having it named as G9, we will define the name to name that cell. And we will name this cell product criteria. And I will add the DN because our worksheet name is define names. And press enter. And now that cell has a defined name. So if we were to use this cell reference in our formula, we will use the defined name that we have created right here. Let's create a defined name for the sales rep here too. That is cell H9. I'm selected on cell H9, and on our name box, I will name this sales rep criteria DN and press enter. Now we have named 2 single cells right here. The next thing that I would like to show you is how to name a table. And then we will name the cell ranges for each of these columns or each of these fields. So now to name the table, we will select the table that we would like to name, and I'm selecting all this table. And on our name box, I will name this table monthly rev DN. Rev for revenue, DN for define names. And I press enter. Now next, let's name the cell ranges. Now that is one option to define names for a single cell or a selected range where we selected our table and we named it. The other option to define names for a selected range is to select the range that you want to name, including the column label. And then on your ribbon, you go to the Formulas tab. On the Defined Names group, you click on the Define Name button arrow, and then you select the Define Name. You click on that, and we can now give a defined name to our selected range. We will name this Revenue DN for the Define Name worksheet, and we will click OK. And now we can see we have named that selected range, and it is named right here on our name box. So you can either select the range, name it on the name box, or click on your Define Names on the Define Names group on your Formulas tab. Click on that arrow, click on the Select Name button, and you name your selected range. We'll add the DN for the Define Names worksheet and click OK. And then we will name this other range for the sales rep column or the sales rep field. And I will click on the name box and I will name this sales rep DN and press enter. And next, we will select the region field. I will use the Define Names group. Click on the Define Name button arrow. Select and click on the Define Name. And I'm naming this region DN. Click OK. And next is the Date field. So I'm selecting the Date field here, that entire range. On my Define Names group, I'm clicking on the Define Name button arrow. Click the Define Names option, and we are naming this Date DN, and click OK. Another thing that I would like to point out, on the Define Names group, we use this button to define our names. We can use the Name Manager, and I will click on it to open that. And you can see the Name Manager dialog box is open right there. You can create a new name, you can edit, or you can delete the defined names that you have created. And you can see these are all the names that we have created for our workbook right there. I will close that. So now that we have created defined names for our cells, our table, and our fields, the next thing that we will do is to create a unique list for our products and the sales rep here. And we have seen how to create that. We already know how to do that. So equals sort unique, and I will select the product fields there. Close that, and enter. And then I will do the same for the sales rep, equals sort unique, and I will select the sales rep field, close, and enter. Now we have our unique list here. So the next thing that we need to do is to create a data validation for our product criteria here and our sales rep criteria here. So I will click on the product criteria cell right there, and I will go to the data tab on our ribbon. On the data tools, data validation. Right now we are allowing any value. We'll change that to a list. Click on the source box and select our list. Click OK, and do the same thing with the sales rep. Data validation. We are allowing data from a list. Click on the source box and click the sales rep there and click OK. Now we have our data validation for both of our criteria right there. So now the next thing that we will do is to calculate the total revenue for the product and the sales rep that we have specified there. So we'll do equals SUMIFS. Our sum range, we already named the revenue field, so we will use the defined name that we named there, and the defined name was revenue DN, and we can see it right there. We tap to select it, and once you select it, you can see it has selected the range that we selected with that defined name. We put a comma. Our criteria range, we can start with either the sales rep or the product. Let's start with the sales rep this time. And if you're starting with the sales rep, our range will be the sales rep field. We name that as sales rep DN, and it's right there. Tab to select it, and we can see on our table it's selected as well. We'll put a comma, and then our criteria, we defined the name for our sales rep criteria. So I will type the name there, sales rep, and the name was sales rep criteria DN. We tab to select that. And now we go to our second criteria, which is the product. We put a comma to separate the argument, and our second criteria range will be the product fields. So we type the product, and that's product DN, and it's right there. It comes up. We tab to select it once we have selected that, and we put a comma to go to the next argument. The next argument is our product criteria. So we type that, product criteria DN. I'm using my down arrow to select that, and then tab to select that cell reference with a defined name. And now we can close that. And once I enter, our formula calculates all the specified criteria that we have provided in our formula. And we can see we have the defined names in our formula. We're not showing any cell references, but we are showing the defined names depending on how we named our cells, all our cell ranges. Now, the next one that we will do is to add the total revenue for the specified product in each region for a specified sales rep. We have 3 different criteria here that we are adding with. And again, we are not using the cell references, but we are using the defined names because we already named our cell references and our cell range. We'll do equals SUMIFS. Our sum range is the revenue DN. That's the way we named the range. It's right there. We tap to select it. We put a comma. Our criteria range, let's start with the products. So the range will be the product DN. I tap to select it, and then we put a comma. Our criteria now will be the product criteria DN. So that's why naming is really important, and understanding the names that you're naming to your fields or your cell references is also important. I will tap to select that field, and now we have the sum range, criteria range, and our criteria, which is the cell reference for our product criteria right there. And I'll put a comma. And now our second criteria, let's go with the sales rep. So the sales rep DN, I see that. I will tap to select that. And I can see it's selected on my table right there. I put a comma to separate the argument. My criteria will be the sales rep right there. So let's see if we don't type on it and we select it, if it gives us the defined name. So I will select on that. And we can see even if you click on it, it gives you the defined names. And you can see the defined name is also right there. So if you would like to select on it, you just tab and you select on it. So you can either click on the cell reference that has the defined name, or if you remember your defined names, it's easier for you to just type the defined names. So we'll put a comma, and our that criteria, that's the region. So we named that region DN, and it's right there. I tap to select that. And now our criteria for that is the region in our table here. And I select it using my mouse. And now I can close that and enter. And you can see we have our formula calculating, and we have the defined names showing in our formula. With our formula here complete, and we see we have the defined names showing on our formula. With the defined names, the formulas are much easier to understand. We can also manage the defined names with the name manager. And we saw that if I go back to the formulas tab and click on the name manager, with the name manager, we can create new names. We can edit the names that we have already created, And we can also delete the names that we have created, and or we can use the name manager to find all the names that we have used in our workbook. All these are the names that we have in this workbook. I will close that. We have come to the end of this video, our class video number 6, where we have learned the 3 types of formulas, and we learned how to do calculations with the Excel table formulas. We have also learned how to create defined names and use that in our formulas. In this workbook, I've included homework worksheets for your practice, and in our next video, M365 Excel Basics video number 7, we will learn how to create pivot tables. So that is it for this video. Bye for now, and I will see you in our next video.